Welcome back to a page from history. This is the 125th birth anniversary year of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. It is probably appropriate to say that he remains in the corner of our national pantheon, quite like the school when he went as a 9-year-old boy. The reasons, however, have changed. Dr. Sri Prakash, we were talking about how Dr. Ambedkar had differences with the national movement. Let's also try to understand that he became part of the interim government, became part of, he was a law minister. What led to his resignation from government?
I'll come that part later on.
Yeah.
Being a minister in Nehru cabinet in Jalandhar in 1951, addressing a rally, he says that since last 4 or 5 years, more than 20,000 public gatherings have been addressed by Nehru, but he has not given a blueprint of Dalit development in society. This is the contribution of Congress. He questions Nehru and Congress both. As of his resignation is concerned, this is not known to the public that he resigned on issue of women empowerment. In Hindu Code Bill, he was in favor of giving property and asset rights to the women.
Right.
And that was opposed by many members
within the Constituent Assembly.
Within the Constituent Assembly
it was kept
and
pending.
the government.
Eventually it happened in 56 when the Hindu Code Bills were passed.
And on that ground, Dr. Baba Saheb Ambedkar went on resigning with this notion that if this government and Constituent Assembly is not ready to give right to the 50% of the society, then what they can give to others. Perhaps this was the basic condenser to his resignation. No doubt there were various other issues.
Let me get the opinion of Dr. Sushma Yadav on this point. His resignation. Do you agree with what Professor Sri Prakash is saying, that the primary reason was on the Hindu Code Bills? It was not a general, once again, realization that no, it is not possible to work with these people.
I would agree with him, but I think there was more to it. That was the culmination of his
that could have been just a trigger. That could have been the catalyst.
Discontentment.
Right.
Because when he wrote what Congress and Gandhi have done to untouchables, when he was fighting all through with Gandhi, it was all Congress. Then he was co-opted into the Constituent Assembly, and again there was an inner fight which was going within, and then he could, of course, he shortly could see the game that is coming from Bengal or via Bengal, and he is not being able to get a straight seat from this party, which otherwise co-opted him.
Ironically supported by the Muslim League.
And Muslim League, where he had very clear thoughts on minorities in Pakistan and federalism.
Very sharp differences.
So just look at the feeling of frustration within. And then he talks about Hindu Code Bill, and then the president at that time and the Congress at that time, they start looking at him with doubt, as if he's breaking the Hindu society, which he all through surrendered for uniting. Otherwise he could have broken it.
But it eventually was basically in 56 when the laws were passed.
Indeed.
Tremendously strengthened the position of women in Hindu society.
And women hardly know even now.
And women were so supportive of the Hindu Code Bills when it was passed, and they continue to be very important.
So it was all these reasons panting up.
Right.
Otherwise it was not easy to resign, because there must be a contestation or conflict within, that if he goes and resigns from this government also, how would he fight for his own people? And I think he was right, because whatever he fought for in the Constituent Assembly and later on the government, be it the reservation, be it the other empowerment schemes, all of them would be neglected after his going out. And it happened with the reservation. I'm sure my panelists would agree with me. It took years and years in formulating the system and mechanism to implement what was conceded to him in 1932 in terms of Pune Pact.
Right. Professor Sukumar, trying to understand from you the various attempts of Dr. Ambedkar to get into politics. He does it in the 1930s. The Labour Party, Indian Labour Party is formed, does not do very successful in the 36-37 elections. Comes back after, during the time of independence, he's made a member from the Congress, but eventually again when he quits, he contests the Lok Sabha election, the first Lok Sabha elections, very sadly and quite unfortunately loses the election. forms a political party. So what was it that despite his iconic status, he was not, quote unquote, an electoral success?
Well, see, any person who is questioning the core of the system might not well succeed immediately within electoral politics.
Right.
That could be one reason what I can assume,
right.
that because he was questioning the basic root cause of the system, roots of the system. See, by the time the entire political groups were consolidated and they have their own electoral base, but somehow Ambedkar was not able to consolidate his political electoral base by convincing the deprived groups, because they were not so organized by the time, they were not so educated by the time. The movement later on, if you see that after 70s, 80s only, the Dalits started mobilizing themselves.
In fact, the Dalit movement completely frittered away after the death of Dr. Ambedkar.
Yeah, and then later on in the 80s it took again
Only
its
in the
rebirth.
80s, yes.
But in between, whatever has happened, the idea of Pune Pact, which is the basic root for sabotaging the electoral politics of Dalits, is one fundamental reason where I can say that that's how he was.
I know, I'm going to ask you now a slightly provocative question, but in hindsight, would you say that it would have been better for the Dalits to have had a separate electorate? I know, and I'm saying this despite the fact that I have not been a supporter of separate electorate for religious minorities when it was introduced in 1909 and subsequently. So, but
you mean to say,
are you trying to argue that it would have been better?
That would have been better. It would have been better. Now what is happening? The entire Dalits.
I've stirred the hornets.
Let me.
Let me get this.
Let me give the reason. Let me give the reason. Then I'll Siri Prakash. Let me give.
Yes.
See, look. What is happening with the Dalits who are representing in all the parties now? Are they really representing their communities? They're representing the party's interests. So if that would have been the case, at least the electoral dynamics would have had some kind of, there would have been a change. That's what I mean to say. So now entire Dalit politics is being appropriated, where, of course, it's not that easy also to appropriate Dalit politics in a contemporary, situation. But certainly the separate seats would have made them much more, their politics much more vibrant.
Separate seats they had, but
separate electorates,
separate electorates
would have made difference.
Your opinion, Professor Sri Prakash, there is an argument that yes, tokenism would not have continued if they had a separate electorate. Only those people, only the Dalits can elect Dalit leaders. But it would also prevent assimilation of Dalits in the rest of Indian society, the way it happened for religious minorities until the time when there was no universal, suffrage. What is your opinion on it?
My worry is national unity, right? If separate electorate on the religious lines with Baba Saheb Ambedkar would have been a reality, it would have been a great question mark on unity within the society and within the Hindu segment of the society. One. Second is the assimilation part. Right. Though we didn't have the separate electorate at that time, it was a reservation for electoral purposes only initially. But till date, Baba Saheb lost his first election. It's not that he was only opposing the Congress. The society even today is not ready to accept wholeheartedly to a person of a certain classes to get elected from the general seats. That was the reason, and at that time society was not educated, society was not prepared. That's why a person like Baba Saheb Bhimrao Ambedkar lost the election. Another thing I would like to add here, who was opposing Congress? After Bhagat Singh, Chandrasekhar Azad, the last phase of 30s, who is challenging Congress? Politically, it is Baba Saheb Ambedkar and Muslim League. Later in 1934,
very marginally, maybe the communists.
I'm coming to that. Socialist Party of India 1934 merged with the Congress, and later partially only
the RSS starts becoming a bit of a factor from the late
but
1930s.
RSS was not a party.
Not a party, yes, but it was definitely trying to articulate a political
as
viewpoint.
Organization,
Yes.
they have their own concerns. They were supporting Hindu Mahasabha.
But then there was opposition. You know, the
Yeah.
Congress itself was
But
actually
it was
an umbrella organization. You
Yeah.
had Gandhi and you had Subhash Chandra Bose.
legally,
two completely different
politically,
streams.
with homework, legally, politically, with homework, with support of certain blocks of the society. It was Baba Saheb Ambedkar who was challenging the Congress.
Right.
Barring Muslim League, it was Baba Saheb Ambedkar only. Communists didn't have that much support. Socialist Party didn't have that much support. RSS was not organized in a form of political party. Only Baba Saheb, as a political leader, was challenging the.
No, that's an important point which you make, Professor Yadav. You know, this entire issue of separate electorate. Now, are we trying to say that there were these two struggles? One was the larger struggle for freedom from colonial yoke. The other was the struggle for freedom from of one community of India from the rest of the communities. Now, would you like to look at the entire narrative in that way? In that way, it was important that there was no necessity for a separate electorate?
No.
Or you also think that in hindsight it would have been better for separate, as Professor Sukumar is arguing?
At times, I think it would have been better, you know, like him, because what happens is, in this kind of political scenario that we have, that anyone who gets elected from the reserved constituency has also to belong to either a dominant group within that party or to the dominant political party which is going to win. And therefore, if you want to get a ticket from that political party, you have to speak the same language and you have to prove that yes, you belong to the same ideology. It's not the idea or ideology or interest of the group that you belong to, but the group that is making you contest.
You have to talk on behalf of entire society. You cannot talk only about one particular segment of society.
No, and then very interestingly, you know what is happening is, everyone has started looking at them at the reserved candidates. So reserved candidates would speak the reserved quote unquote language, but will contest from the same group. Now it can't be the best of them, like what happened to Baba Saheb Ambedkar. I can see in this form also. Had it been separate electorate, the best among them or the most popular among them may have maybe come out, and maybe they could have spoken the language of that community. That's a very big.
This is surely a very debatable point. We'll take another break at this point and then come back to discuss the next segment. Dr. Ambedkar was first elected to the assembly from undivided Bengal because he had lacked support in his home province of Bombay. He joined the Nehru cabinet and headed the drafting committee of the Constituent Assembly. Dr. Ambedkar quit the government after differences with Nehru. He formed the All India Scheduled Caste Front but lost in the first Lok Sabha elections. Just months before his death, he led 500,000 of people and converted to Buddhism. Don't go away. We'll be back after a quick break. Welcome back to A Page from History. This is the 125th birth anniversary year of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, and we are talking about his contribution in the making of India as a modern nation. Professor Sukumar, you know, let's try to look at Dr. Ambedkar's life after India becomes independent. You know, he's had by and large, universally accepted a wonderful stint as the chairman of the drafting committee of the Constitution. Disagrees with the government, resigns it for various reasons. We have talked about it. 5 years still of his life left, 51 to 56. You know, how do you look at his evolution in that period, and how do you look at the evolution of what we can now call as Dalit politics?
Look, at the end of the day when Ambedkar, after resigning from his law ministership, it was like a very utter frustration. I mean, he quits the job and he dies with a very sad.
But he's nominated to the Rajya Sabha.
Yeah, no, it's nominated, but he was.
But he's
he was like nowhere like he doesn't want to be as an active political personality for different reasons. Precisely because that the efforts which he took to initiate certain, like for example, Hindu Code Bill or whatever it may be, why he resigned from his first law ministership. And then he, from that phase to until his death, he was quite he was not so happy, to be very honest, that, what kind of changes that whether the society has experienced, what is his contribution towards to the emancipatory discourse of different sections of the society. I mean, it's not that, when we talk about Ambedkar, it narrows down to only caste, which is a major problematic, and I think we must come out from that
framework. Yeah.
But anyway, now coming to the contemporary Dalit politics, when if you see that, how Ambedkar's great contribution towards to contemporary Dalit politics, if you see that, how Kanshiram has emerged as one man who led the entire Bahujan Samaj party towards to the Uttar Pradesh, which is the bastion of the fundamental, culturally fundamental and
upper caste
dominance. And he made sure that if we can conquer such kind of state where it will be easy for the states like Maharashtra and Andhra Pradesh, where Dalit movement was much more vociferous at that particular point of time. The question is why it has why it is experiencing a setback, within the Dalit politics.
Failed is not the right word.
I'm not using it. That's what I
use the word.
Took it back.
There is definitely a certain amount of stagnation that one can see. It not the kind of euphoria, not the kind of it doesn't appear anymore like
still
in the 90s.
Still Dalit politics is much more relevant. If Dalit politics is not relevant, why mainstream political parties is running for Dalit vote bank? I mean, they are more conscious now. They are more strategic now. So now, before any other party or the party which is already existing, before they came in to take a strategic position to take back the political fold of the Dalits, the mainstream political parties is very strategic to not to allow these groups to consolidate politically.
Right.
And to, I mean, it's a strategy. It's a strategy. I look, it's a strategy. So, I mean, somewhere that the Dalit politics is again being shaped, and it is getting shaped. And most probably in another next 5 years, the politics would be very much interesting, particularly in the context of
it's very difficult to actually try to imagine that what is going to happen in future. But if we actually try to stick ourselves to Professor Sri Prakash, to the background, what we are talking about, it was a dramatic event, of conversion, 500,000 people to Buddhism. Must have been a tremendous amount of shock in society, both within the Dalit community and even within the upper caste Hindus. How was it received, and what was the political reaction to it? I know that Baba Sahib didn't live very long after October 56. But
listen, it was not a shock to the community.
It was not to the Dalit community.
No, not to the Dalit community, neither to the upper class of the society. Because in 1935-36, Baba Sahib declared that he will die. He will not die as a Hindu.
But they thought it was just probably just a statement.
No, he waited for long. He waited for 20 years that society should come over. And there is a very interesting discourse between Bir Savarkar and Baba Sahib through Munje. And Bir Savarkar wished that he remains with the fold, and Munje mediates in it. But Baba Sahib assures Gandhi and Bir Savarkar both that whatever I will be doing, that will not be as harmful to the Hindu society as you people are thinking. And in first go, when he was tilted towards Sikhism, and his own son and nephew was in Swarn Mandir for 3 months to observe the practices of Sikhism.
Right.
And he wrote a letter to N. Raja with this caption that is confidential, will not disclose to anyone and will not get it published. But N. Raja discloses the confidentiality of it and discusses the issue with Gandhiji, and the conversion to Sikhism of Dr. Ambedkar effort, perhaps he was tilted towards that.
This would have been many years before the conversion.
Yes. It was initially in 30, perhaps it was 38 when he wrote that letter to N. Raja. And Gandhiji, Siraj Gopalachari, N. Raja, they made that letter public.
Let me try to understand, Professor Yadav, the conversion, how did it help? Did it help anyone? Or what was it? It was just a symbolic act. How does one go and go back and look at a decision like that?
No, in fact, he lived up to his word, so that his followers don't feel that if there was a man, who betrayed what he said,
who did not
stand up for what he committed and what he said, because whatever he said after a very, very thoughtful process of challenging the system that he was in and challenging the
for 21 long years he kept on trying to get dignity.
And I think, yes, for his own people, equality, liberty, fraternity, dignity. These were the words that he wanted to have for his own people, and which I think in the same religion he was not assured to get. He followed, he converted to a religion there also. I think it is the thoughtfulness of Baba Saheb Ambedkar, a religion where individual was supreme, where his own conscience could be his guide, where he could be his own enlightenment, Appa Deepo Bhav, which means he could have his own, he was not following blindly any guru, any teacher, any book, any cult. And I think there also, because Baba Saheb Ambedkar called Neo-Ambedkarites or Neo-Buddhists, because it was not merely Buddha that he followed. He said you have a right to follow your conscience, your reason, and ultimately take your own decisions.
Basically what you're trying to, even through the act of conversion, he wanted to empower his own people.
His own people, indeed.
Dr. Sukumar, as we get into the concluding part of this program, let's try to, have a summarization, that what does Dr. Ambedkar, you would like Dr. Ambedkar to be remembered now. Everybody is talking about having one aspect of Dr. Ambedkar. What aspect of Dr. Ambedkar do you think really needs to be emphasized?
Well, the image that the history has given to Ambedkar is to think about only caste, which absolutely not at all. He needs to be understood beyond caste.
He's a much more
nation.
Much
For example, he spoke much extensively on nation. He critically engaged with religion. Perhaps he is the one who he is a feminist, and the entire discourse of feminism, mainstream feminism, is missing Ambedkar as a feminist. And as a feminist, as a constitutional visionary who aspired for liberty, equality, justice, not for just Dalits, but for the people who have been suppressed for thousands of years by the dominant culture, by the dominant caste, by the dominant religion. All these things need to be thoroughly understood. That is where now I am very happy that Ambedkar is becoming much more relevant. But again, my own submission to my friends, ideologically whom I might differ, is that please, let us not misquote and misinterpret Ambedkar as an intellectual.
I think that's well said. Let's not misquote, misinterpret not just Ambedkar but any of our national icons. That is the least that we can do for not only for this country but also for the leaders who have brought us to this point. It's wonderful to have the three of you on this program. It's time for me to wind it up. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
It is time for us to think how we should remember Dr. Ambedkar. We all need to remember that he played a great role in giving India the constitution that we still value and cherish. He also made us realize the disparities that remain in India. He gave hope for a better tomorrow to his followers. His adversaries learnt from him the power of debate and the importance of discussion despite differences. He may not have been a freedom fighter in the classical sense, but he struggled to modernize Indian society. Do give us your feedback on this program and write to us. Our email ID is historylstv@gmail.com. We will return next week. There will be another page from history and another panel of experts. Till then, goodbye.